The biggest decision in Rush's history after the loss of Neil Peart was not made in a recording studio. It was not made on a stage. It happened behind closed doors, where two legendary musicians had to answer one impossible question. Could Rush ever return without Neil Peart? For years, the answer seemed clear: no. After Neil Peart passed away in 2020, many fans believed Rush's story had reached its final chapter. Peart was not just the drummer, he was the heartbeat of the band, the songwriter behind many of their most iconic lyrics, and a musician whose style became almost impossible to replace. But then something unexpected happened. Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson started asking themselves a question they never thought they would revisit. What if Rush's music still had one more journey left? That question eventually led to the announcement of the Rush 50-something tour, a 2026 return to the stage celebrating more than 5 decades of Rush music and honoring Neil Peart's legacy. But bringing Rush back came with a massive challenge. A Rush tour is not like a normal rock show. The drums are not just keeping time. The drummer has to handle some of the most complex parts in rock history, songs filled with unusual rhythms, technical changes, and arrangements that generations of musicians studied. So the real decision was not simply who can play Rush songs. The real question was who can step into Neil Peart's seat while respecting what he created. And that is where the million-dollar decision changed everything. Instead of searching for someone who would imitate Neil, Rush chose a different path. They brought in German drummer Anika Nilles, a highly respected musician known for her technical ability and musical creativity. But behind that choice was a risk, because Rush fans are among the most loyal and most protective audiences in rock music. The moment her name was announced, one question was everywhere. Could anyone really fill the empty space left by Neil Peart? And the answer would not come from words. It would come from the first time Anika sat behind that legendary drum kit. When Rush revealed Anika Nilles as the drummer joining Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson for their 2026 tour, the reaction was exactly what many people expected: excitement mixed with uncertainty. Because replacing a musician like Neil Peart was never supposed to be a normal band decision. Neil's influence was enormous. For more than 40 years, fans watched him transform the role of a rock drummer. His playing was powerful, precise, and filled with ideas that made Rush songs feel like musical adventures. He was known for his massive drum setups, complicated arrangements, and a style that inspired countless drummers around the world. Neil Peart, that created a unique problem for Rush. If they hired someone who copied Neil too closely, fans might say the band was trying to recreate the past. But if they hired someone who completely changed the sound, fans might feel like Rush had lost its identity. The person they needed had to understand one thing: this was not about replacing Neil Peart. It was about respecting his legacy while allowing Rush's music to continue. That is why Anika Nilles became such an interesting choice. Before joining Rush, Nilles had already built a reputation as one of the most creative drummers in modern music. Her performances gained worldwide attention because she approached rhythm in her own way, combining technical skill, control, and a unique musical voice. She was not known as a Neil Peart copy, and that may have been exactly the reason Rush considered her. Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson were not looking for someone to pretend the past never changed. They were looking for a musician who could step into the room with confidence while understanding the weight of the moment. But there was still another challenge. A Rush tour is a huge production. The band's songs require incredible preparation, and every detail matters, from the arrangements to the live performance. One mistake on stage would not just be noticed, it would be analyzed by millions of fans who know every beat of every classic Rush song. That pressure is something very few musicians would willingly accept, but Anika Nilles accepted it, and behind the scenes, the preparation for Rush's return became more than just rehearsing songs. It became a test of whether a legendary band could create a new chapter without forgetting the one that made them legendary. And the next question became the biggest one of all. What happened the first time Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson heard Anika play Rush's most demanding songs? The first rehearsals were always going to be the moment that decided everything. Because no matter how talented a drummer is, playing Rush is a completely different challenge. These songs were built around a very specific musical language. Neil Peart's drumming was not just about speed or power. It was about storytelling. Every fill, every accent, and every change in rhythm had a purpose. For decades, Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson had performed alongside that sound. They knew exactly what Rush was supposed to feel like. So when Anika Nilles stepped behind the drums, the pressure was enormous. She was not walking into a normal rehearsal room. She was walking into the space once occupied by one of the most respected drummers in music history. But instead of trying to recreate Neil Peart note for note, Nilles brought something different. Her approach showed confidence and musical awareness. She understood that the goal was not to become Neil, because nobody could. The goal was to honor the songs. That difference was important. Many fans had worried that Rush's return might feel like a tribute act or a nostalgic replay of the past, but the band's decision suggested something else. They wanted the music to breathe again. For Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson, this was also personal. Rush had always been built on chemistry between the musicians. The connection between the bass, guitar, and drums created the identity of the band. Finding someone who could join that conversation was more important than finding someone who could simply play difficult parts. And that is where Nilles' musicianship mattered. Her style gave the songs a new energy, while still respecting the original foundation. The reaction from many fans started to shift. The conversation changed from, "Can she replace Neil Peart?" to, "Maybe that was never the right question." Because the truth was simple. Neil Peart's place in Rush history was permanent. No drummer could erase that. But another drummer could help the music continue. And that idea was at the center of Rush's comeback. Still, there was one major obstacle left. A tour of this size was not only an artistic decision, it was also a massive financial risk. Millions of dollars would go into production, equipment, crew, travel, and preparation. And every person involved knew the same thing. If this comeback failed, it would not just be a failed concert. It would be the final statement of one of rock's greatest bands. And that is why the decision behind Rush's 2026 tour became worth so much more than money. The financial side of bringing Rush back was almost as complicated as the music itself. A major tour is not just three musicians walking onto a stage and playing songs. Behind every performance is a massive operation. Production crews, lighting, sound engineers, transportation, equipment, rehearsals, insurance, and countless people working behind the scenes. For a band like Rush, expectations were even higher. Fans were not expecting a simple comeback show. They were expecting an experience that matched the legacy of a band that spent decades creating some of the most respected live performances in rock history. That meant every decision mattered. The choice of drummer affected everything. It affected rehearsals, it affected the arrangements, it affected the confidence of the entire production team, and most importantly, it affected whether fans would believe in this new version of Rush. The pressure surrounding Anika Nilles was unlike anything most musicians experience. She was not just joining a famous band, she was joining a story that already had a legendary ending. Neil Peart's final performance with Rush had happened years earlier, and many people believed that was where the story should stay. Bringing the band back meant reopening a chapter that fans had emotionally closed. But Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson understood something important. The legacy of Rush was never only about one person. It was about creativity, friendship, and the connection between musicians. That belief made the comeback possible. Instead of chasing the past, they focused on creating something respectful for the future. And that is where the million-dollar decision became bigger than just choosing a drummer. The real investment was trust. Trust that fans would accept a new chapter. Trust that the music could survive a change. Trust that honoring Neil Peart did not mean freezing Rush in time forever. As rehearsals continued and the tour plans moved forward, one thing became clear. Anika Nilles was not there to erase a legend. She was there to help carry the music forward. But the biggest test was still waiting. Because no rehearsal room could fully prepare them for the moment when the lights went down, thousands of fans filled the arena, and Rush finally returned to the stage. That first night would answer the question everyone had been asking since the announcement. Could Rush still feel like Rush without Neil Peart behind the drums? When the first notes of Rush's 2026 tour finally fill the arena, the moment will represent something much bigger than a concert. It will represent a question that has followed the band for years. Can a legendary group move forward while carrying the memory of someone who helped define it? For Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson, the answer was never about pretending nothing changed. They knew Neil Peart's legacy could not be duplicated. His impact on Rush was too important. His playing style, his songwriting, and his personality were part of the foundation that made the band what it became. But they also knew something else. Music is meant to be played. Songs are meant to be heard. And the connection between a band and its fans does not disappear just because one chapter ends. That mindset is what allowed Rush to make the decision to return. And for Anika Nilles, stepping onto that stage meant accepting one of the biggest challenges in modern rock. Every beat would be compared. Every fill would be examined. Every moment would be watched by fans who grew up listening to Neil Peart. But pressure like that can also create something powerful. Instead of looking at the situation as an impossible replacement, Nilles approached it as a responsibility to respect the music, a responsibility to respect the fans, and a responsibility to bring her own musicianship into a band that has always valued creativity. That may be the biggest reason the decision worked. Rush was never a band built on standing still. From their earliest years, they constantly experimented, changed, and pushed themselves into new territory. So bringing in a new drummer was not only a practical choice, it was also consistent with the spirit of Rush itself. The $1 million decision was never simply about hiring a drummer. It was about deciding whether the future of Rush was worth fighting for. And after years of silence, the band was ready to find out. But the final question remained: would longtime fans accept this new era when they saw it with their own eyes? When Rush finally returns to the stage in 2026, the biggest story will not only be about the songs they play, it will be about the decision that made the comeback possible. The decision to continue without trying to replace the irreplaceable, because the truth is, nobody could become Neil Peart. His place in Rush history is permanent. He was one of the greatest drummers in rock history, and his contribution to the band will always be remembered by millions of fans around the world. But Rush's return showed a different kind of respect. Instead of copying the past, they chose to honor it. By bringing in Anika Nilles, Geddy Lee, and Lifeson made a choice that carried enormous pressure, but also showed confidence in the future of the band. They chose a musician who could bring her own identity while respecting the foundation Neil helped build. And that may be the real meaning behind the $1 million decision. It was never about finding someone to fill an empty seat. It was about finding someone who understood the responsibility of sitting there. Rush's story has always been about evolution. The band survived changing musical trends, decades of pressure, and the loss of a legendary member. Now their next chapter is about proving that a legacy does not have to end to be respected. Sometimes the greatest tribute is allowing the music to continue. Because when those classic Rush songs are played again, fans will not only hear the past, they will hear a band choosing to move forward. And that is why the decision to bring Anika Nilles into Rush's 2026 tour may become remembered as one of the most important choices the band ever made. Not because it replaced a legend, but because it showed that a legend can inspire something new.